if he hits the wrong note or the wrong string, in a millisecond, so quickly he's back on track and he's fine again. And he handles it with such grace. And he doesn't get stuck in a loop of continuing to make more mistakes on that guitar. No, small mistake, completely fine, boom. And often you won't even know if you're watching him live. If you're watching him live, you won't even realize that he's just made a mistake because he's so graceful with it. And that is one of the skills that you learn as you master this process. You'll still make mistakes. You'll probably still have little hiccups and little stutters and blocks here, and so small and minimal, and you don't get stuck in the loop anymore, and you can get right back on track so quickly that it doesn't negatively affect your life. Now, myth number 2 we need to talk about quickly here is anti-stuttering devices and medications are real solutions. That is also a myth. That is not true. On the other hand, the truth is, while devices can work for a few days, they're a giant waste of money if you actually want fluency that lasts. And as for medications, perhaps meds for anxiety can reduce stuttering slightly, but it won't actually rewire those anxieties, and therefore it will be very limited in its effectiveness. So, plain and simple, buying, those in-ear feedback devices or whatever new devices are out there now, or medications, they're so limited in their ability to change your brain that it might work for a few days, but if you want long-term fluency, you're going to need a better plan, and that is what I'm giving you today. Okay, so that is myth number 2. And finally, myth number 3 here is this idea that you can overcome stuttering in 3 days, or insert 10 days or 1 day, or whatever people will try to sell to you that, hey, buy my program, spend a bunch of money, and you can beat stuttering in 3 days. It's a complete myth. It's ridiculous. This is not how the brain works. The truth of the matter is that the brain in many ways has a speed limit. And that speed limit is at least 6 to 12 weeks of consistent effort and practice before you can make transformative changes with your speech. Any claim that you can overcome stuttering in something like 3 days is a deeply anti-scientific claim. Real transformation takes time. Your brain has a speed limit. You're not going to change that. Now, I'll mention this quickly. Yes, there are outliers. Yes, there are anomalies. There are people who there was like a psychological switch that happened at a point in their lives where it's almost like this conversion type experience from having that stuttering habit to then transforming in a very short time, maybe having some type of experience or spiritual experience, whatever it might be. Yes, that is possible, but it's probably not what's going to happen for you. The vast majority of us, that's not going to be the path. It's not a viable path. We can't rely on a miracle to save us. We need to go down the path that is proven, that is going to get us results. And you're not going to do that by buying into these false myths of this, ideas like you can overcome stuttering in 3 days. It's just not how it works. And one of my favorite quotes on this topic of speed and patience is by a man named Richard Evans, and it is direction is more important than speed. And it's so true. Direction's more important than speed. Focus on direction. Focus on the plan. You just can't expect it to take 3 days or even 30 days. It's incredibly quickly. Okay, for these complex habits to change, we need to give ourselves time. We need to be patient. And we need to go in the right direction and have that be our focus more than trying to just find fluency as crazy fast as possible. And because a lot of that is just impatience, okay? So we need to build some discipline. So here's the overview, once again, of the 3 stuttering myths. Number 1, if you don't grow out of it when you're a kid, then you're stuck with it forever. Myth number 2, anti-stuttering devices and medications are real solutions. And finally, myth number 3, you can overcome stuttering in 3 days. Now let's move on to the next chapter in this workshop, and let's talk about how to find healing from the stuttering wounds. Now, I use the word wounds here very intentionally because that is what happens. We have wounds, and we have these emotional wounds where we have these experiences where we feel social embarrassment, and that is an emotional wound. We feel like we just can't be completely ourselves because we're so so distracted with trying to not feel embarrassed with our stuttering, right? And trying to hide it and trying to make sure that people don't discover our secret or whatever it might be. Those are wounds. And we often have these, yes, I'm going to say it, traumatic experiences, because there are some real traumas for many of us who have struggled with stuttering that need some healing. And we need to be able to look at these experiences as wounds that need to be healed, and that, yes, can be healed, but we need to figure out how to find that healing. And that is what I want to share with you here. So I want to give you 3 steps. These are the 3 things that I've narrowed it down to, what I believe to be the 3 most important steps to find the healing from these wounds that we've accumulated over the years through the pain of stuttering and blocking. Step 1 to find this healing is awareness. Awareness is unbelievably important. So now, what does this mean? What do we need to become aware of? Well, you need to become aware of what you sound like when you speak, both when you're fluent and when you're stuttering. So how do you build this awareness? Well, this can look like standing in front of the mirror. This can look like recording yourself. But more than any of that, this is just putting in the time to practice, putting in the time, working on a plan, working on a system, having a daily routine, and really getting in touch with what your voice sounds like. And then as you build that awareness, as you're by yourself and probably not stuttering as much, you'll then also start to become aware of what you sound like and what your speed is, and when you're stuttering and how you're anticipating. You're building this awareness. Awareness is the prerequisite to change. If you're not aware of what you want to change exactly, then how are you going to change it? That's just not going to happen. So you need to build that awareness. You need to figure out and really internalize what you sound like, both when you're fluent and when you're stuttering, okay? And the step-by-step plan, the daily routine that you need to do to really make that happen. We're going to get into that. You're going to get all of that as we get to the end of this workshop. Another thing you need to become aware of is the incredible potential you have for personal transformation. You have so much potential. The brain is incredible, and you have the ability to change things about you in miraculous ways. Okay, so you need to become aware of that. And hopefully this workshop is giving you that hope, because that is the point. I want you to feel that hope. And finally, the third thing you need to become aware of here is the fact that wounds are an opportunity to transcend into a better future. This is just one of my favorite things to think about and to kind of meditate on, is these wounds. Yes, they hurt, but if you can heal from those wounds, and as you heal from these wounds, your life ends up being better than if you had never had these wounds in the first place. So that's step 1, awareness. That is what you need to heal the wounds of stuttering. Now, if you want a book to read on this, go read Anthony DeMello's Awareness. It's one of my favorite books, and if you want to dive deep into this topic of awareness, go read this book. It's just phenomenal. Now, before we move on to steps 2 and 3 here of the how to heal these stuttering wounds, I want to talk very quickly about the dark side of awareness. Because awareness is not all joy and fun. There are some difficulties and some hurdles that will likely present themselves to you as you become more aware of your speech. And one of the outcomes of that, at least temporarily for a lot of people, it can lead to your speech getting worse before it gets better. So this is what you would expect from awareness. Yes, over the long term it gets transformatively better, but in the short term it can actually get worse. And an example I like to use here is, let's say for some weird reason that I needed to change the way that I walked. So I needed to change the mechanics of how I walked, or like my walking style for some reason, or I would have a really bad health problem. So let's say that is what I would have to do. Well, yes, eventually I would be able to walk very well and wouldn't have to think about it. It would become a habit. But in the short term, my walking would get worse, right? because I would be thinking about it. I would become aware of my style of walking, and I would be like, okay, I have to change it. I have left foot this way, right leg this way. Okay, so we're not doing this, we're doing that. And for a while, it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. And so I want you to be prepared for that. This is something that a lot of people, it will frustrate them when they try to get a plan for their speech and try to rise above stuttering, is that all of a sudden things get worse, and it's like it can feel devastating, and like, God, I can't, even when I try, it just gets worse. What am I supposed to do? Well, remember, that is a natural part of the process for a lot of people. It is a byproduct of awareness. It's a short-term byproduct. The long-term byproduct of awareness is transformation. So we need awareness. And one of the quotes that I think really encapsulates this idea is by the great Carl Jung, and it is the quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So how this quote by Carl Jung applies to our speech and this awareness that we're building around our speech is that you need to make it conscious. The only way to go from kind of an unaware, unconscious stuttering habit to an unaware, unconscious fluency habit where you're also not thinking about it, the only way to link those two or to bridge that gap is to take it through the conscious mind. You need to go through this process of building that very crystallized awareness of your speech, of your ability to transcend, of your brain's ability to rewire itself to change. You need to build this awareness. You need to make speech a conscious thing. So that is step one to the 3 steps to healing is awareness. Now, step 2 on this path of the 3 steps to healing is diligence. Diligence is so important. Now, what does this include? Well, being diligent with your speech includes doing the practice routine 5 to 6 days a week for as long as necessary. And again, we're going to dive into what exactly that looks like. Being diligent with your speech includes putting in the work even when you're having a bad day or week. And it also includes becoming a student of your brain with the help of books and other forms of education. And finally, step 3 on the 3 steps to healing is you need to have the holistic view or find this holistic perspective. What do I mean by this? Trying to beat stuttering without the support from other areas of your life will likely lead to an emotional burnout. Do not only strive to be a more whole speaker, strive to be a more whole person. And taking the holistic approach, here are a couple examples of what this could look like. You want to ensure that you're getting plenty of sleep. So 7 to 9 hours a night. Sleep is unbelievably important for rewiring your speech habits, for changing from stuttering to fluency, and just overall well-being. You gotta sleep. Like, you cannot be sleep deprived, and you're just not going to live a good life if you're constantly sleep deprived. Okay. And then you expose yourself to anxiety and depression, all of that. And it makes it so much more likely that things are going to go bad when we are sleep deprived. Okay. So that's one. Another thing is you want to engage in a physical fitness routine of some kind, such as going to the gym 3 days a week, or maybe 2 days a week, or maybe even just 1 day a week and then jogging 3 or 4 days of the week, or going on a long walk every day. Just some kind of physical fitness routine where you're going outside or you're going to the gym and you are activating your cardiovascular system, or you're lifting weights, just doing something physically. Because when you don't have this, you can kind of get lethargic, and it also affects your mind's ability in your brain. It's very important for neuroplasticity, as we are going to get into next. The brain's ability to change is physical exercise. That actually plays an important part, just like sleep plays an important part in the brain's ability to change. And finally, another example of this holistic view could be consider things like moving to a new city or going back to school, searching for a new job, etc. Like, if there is something that you keep dreaming about, but you keep ignoring it, don't wait. Start acting on it now, even if it's just one small step. And what I'm touching on here is really procrastination. Like, if there is something that is pulling you, whether it's career-based or maybe you've had this this thought or this dream of just wanting to get out of the small town you've been in for years and you just want to expand your horizons, then start making a plan. Take one step in that direction. Don't stay stuck in a loop that you're going to regret by not taking a risk here and there. And so, yeah, this is part of that holistic view. So those are the 3 steps to healing: awareness, diligence, and developing this holistic perspective, this holistic view of your life. Now, the next section is we need to talk about neuroplasticity. I've already mentioned this a few times, but now we are going to focus specifically on this topic. Neuroplasticity really is your brain's superpower. Okay, so let's talk about it, shall we? What is neuroplasticity? Let's answer that question first. What even is it? The first thing I'll say is neuroplasticity is the reason why any of this is possible. Without neuroplasticity, you're not going to overcome stuttering. Now, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to learn new things and build new habits. So anything new that you try to learn, whether that's a language or a skill or a video game or how to use that new app that you downloaded on your phone, or memorizing a new song, all of that, you need neuroplasticity for that. All those things slightly rewire your brain. And which is exactly my next point here. If you have the ability to listen to a new song and then eventually sing along to it, then you have the ability to rewire your brain, because that is rewiring your brain in a small way. Every new experience and every new thought activates neuroplasticity. Okay? And one last important point here on neuroplasticity is the 2 pillars, you could call these, of neuroplasticity for speech are as follows. Number 1, you slowly strengthen your fluency habit, and the scientific term for this would be long-term potentiation. And number 2, you slowly weaken your stuttering habit, and the scientific term would be long-term depression. By the way, that word depression there does not mean in the clinical sense of being depressed. That's just a word of like suppressing and weakening the habits, the old habits in the brain. Okay? Long-term potentiation, long-term depression. Those are the scientific terms of neuroplasticity. And this is what we are doing with our speech. This is how neuroplasticity works. So you have these 2 habits. You could also think of these as 2 programs that can run in your brain. You have the stuttering program and the fluency program. And they overlap. You might have a sentence or an interaction where you're mostly fluent, kind of stuttering, right? So there's plenty of back and forth and overlap between the 2. But it's still good to conceptualize this as the stuttering program and the fluency program. Well, let's start with the stuttering program. What happens when we weaken that stuttering program through this process of long-term depression? And how do we weaken it? By not attending to it, right? So the less you stutter, and in the same light, the more that you build fluency, these 2 of course happen at the same time, then that stuttering program will become less and less powerful. And more neurons in your brain will then lose grip, or they will abandon that habit, and they will go over to the camp of this more powerful habit that is being built, and where the energy is being focused, of the fluency habit. Because that is what you're developing. You're making that stronger, and you're feeding that, and you're kind of starving that stuttering habit. And so that is neuroplasticity here, is we're growing our fluency habit, and we are weakening our stuttering habit. And then the outcome of that is, again, that fluency habit is so strong that the stuttering habit just doesn't stand a chance. It might pop through now and again in small ways, but it no longer hinders your life. It no longer keeps you from the careers and the opportunities and the social experiences that you want to have. And that is the power of neuroplasticity. Now, another quick book recommendation. If you want to dive even deeper into this stuff, John B. Arden has a book that is quite good. It's called Rewire Your Brain. So if you want to understand neuroplasticity and how the brain works and how it rewires, then this is a really good book to grab. So highly recommend that book by John B. Arden. All right, now let's move on to the next part, which is your fluency toolbox. This is so much fun to implement the fluency toolbox for helping us become more fluent speakers. Now, what is a fluency toolbox? The first thing you need to know about it is it's a set of techniques that helps you kickstart neuroplasticity right away. So I've already talked about patience, diligence, all that stuff, incredibly important. But what's also important is short-term results. Also being able to get good footing right off the bat and actually have tools that can help us immediately, right? Now, a fluency toolbox helps you to be more calm and in control because you now have options. You no longer feel powerless when the stuttering habits try to take over. And finally, these tools are not everything, but they are incredibly valuable, especially for achieving quick wins over the first few days and weeks of your speech journey. So that's an overview of what your fluency toolbox is. And now what I want to do is walk you through exactly the tools that you're going to learn today. And I want to share 5 really powerful tools that you can start using and practicing today. Okay? And we'll go one by one through these, and I'll give you examples of each one of these. Tool number 1, word stretching. Word stretching simply means that instead of speaking like this where all the words are the same length, you instead speak like this, and you stretch some words and you stretch other words, and then maybe sometimes you stretch the word sometimes, like that. Now, the cool thing is there's so much variation here. So you can be as subtle as you want to, or as obvious as you want to. So those are kind of, it's anywhere in between. That's word stretching, okay? So that's the first tool, and we'll dive into how to practice each one of these, but I'll give you quick examples of each one. The next tool you want to learn is over articulation. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. This is basically where you move your lips more. That's basically all it is. Just activate your lips and just pronounce the words, enunciate the words more. And you're trying to keep everything else relaxed. You're just trying to find this place where the voice gets directed more towards kind of this area. You feel your voice as you speak more at the front of your face, rather than being, stuck in your throat and you're just kind of monotone. And instead, bring the voice out here by really moving your lips. Now, again, like the word stretching, this has so many variations as to the spectrum of how strong or how weak you take this. So if I were using it in a very subtle way, it might be like this, where I just do that. It might be like this, where I just do that. On that one word, it might be like this, this, pronounced it more. Or I might really exaggerate it and use this for the entire phrase. And that's going to sound a bit weird, of course, so I'm not asking you to do that in a social setting, but that's the extreme. And then you can take it back to using it in very socially acceptable ways that not only doesn't sound weird, but actually makes you sound smarter. It makes you sound more articulate and all of that. So it's really cool. And I use this all the time. So this runs through my entire speaking style, and I've learned this. This didn't used to be the case. I needed to learn this. And this helps me so much, and it helped me so much to rise above stuttering, was implementing this over-articulation tool. Okay? It's just an incredible tool. Now, the third tool of these 5 tools that I want you to learn are hand movements. Hand movements, what I love about using your hands when you're speaking is you can think of it kind of as the primal nature of it. So if you go way, way back in human history, before the invention of spoken language or written language, for that matter, a lot of communication was done by gesturing, by using our hands to communicate, right? And so it's a very human thing to include our hands when we're speaking and communicating with people. And it has, in kind of a strange way, when you use your hands, it has almost this relieving effect. It releases the voice. It helps you find more rhythm. Now, just like the word stretching over articulation, this can vary so much. You can be as small and subtle, or you can be as big and obvious, kind of like I'm doing here on camera, quite obvious. I'm exaggerating slightly for effect so that you can really see what's happening with my hand movements. But also, if you're just talking with your friends and you just do this, right? You're just like, yeah, and this happened, and like, and you could even like do this, you know, kind of just move your hands, make your hands be a part of your speaking mechanism. You want to include your hands in some way, especially when you start to feel like you're slipping back into that stuttering mode, or that stuttering program is starting to rise up and be the powerful program again. Using your hands can help keep the old habits away, and it can help you to feed that new habit of fluency. Okay, so hand movements, just another incredibly powerful tool. Tool number 4 that I want you to learn is what I call the hammer tool. You could also just think of this as the stop and restart tool. And I call this the hammer tool just because, just like a carpenter or a construction worker, it's one of the most important tools. You can take it everywhere you go, and it's going to have a purpose. It's going to have its place. And all this is as you are approaching a block or a stutter, or even as you are already starting to block or stutter, what do? You stop. That's the first thing. You don't push through the wall of stuttering. You stop. And then what do? You go back, you restart the phrase. I'll give you an example. So I was raised in the state of Pennsylvania. Did you see what I did there? So if I'm thinking, okay, Pennsylvania, I think I'm going to stutter, or maybe I started to stutter. So I was like, I was raised in Pennsylvania. So I stopped. I didn't say, trying to just force it out. No, I stopped. I went back and I restarted. But I didn't just restart like this. What I didn't do is this. I didn't say, I was raised in, where I'm just doing the exact same thing and having the exact same cadence. No, we're changing something. And it doesn't really matter what you're changing. You'll start to discover what works best as you practice these things. But the way that I love to do this, and one example is, you hit a block, you stop, you restart, and then you use a tool like over articulation. So it could go like, so I was raised in the state of Pennsylvania. Not only did I go back and restart, but I used a tool to help me rise above that psychological trap or that loop that I might have been in otherwise if I just kind of had the same tone and just went back and tried to say the same thing and continue to get stuck on the same word. Okay? Hammer tool is just unbelievable. This might take a little bit more time to master than some of the other ones, but you need to practice this. You need to master this one. All right, and finally, tool number 5 is springboard words and phrases. Now, this is very simple. This is if you're struggling to even get started, right, which is a very common struggle, where maybe it's much easier to continue speaking after you're started, but it's like that first word or the first phrase that wants to trip you up. And when that happens, one of the best tools to use, especially over the short term, is to expand your options, really, and to use this springboard words and phrases tool. So to give you a quick example, if I'm ordering coffee at a Starbucks or something, and I walk in and I say, and I feel like I'm going to stutter on, like, I want a grande coffee or whatever. Instead of that, I might say, yes, hi, could I please have a grande coffee? Instead of going in with this saying, grande coffee, or I want a grande coffee. Maybe if your brain is kind of latching on to that first word or the first couple words, by putting a couple extra sounds or even an extra phrase or a couple extra words in front of that to help get you started, to springboard your way into what you then want to say, it can be so helpful. So again, instead of saying medium coffee, you can say, yes, could I please have a medium coffee? Okay, so there you go. Those are 5 incredibly powerful tools that you need to start practicing. And I'm going to give you all of these tools in a daily routine here in a couple minutes. One quick thing I'll mention about the tools, and then we'll move on to the next part, is these tools are not everything. One tool is probably not going to change your life right away. These tools will help you in varying degrees depending on how you respond to them, just everybody's different. So my favorite tool, which happens to be over articulation, might be different than your favorite tool. So everybody's different. Every tool for different people has different levels of effectiveness. So these aren't miracles. These aren't everything, but they are incredibly useful for helping us build confidence and to start feeding that fluency habit, that fluency program, so we can make it as strong as possible. Okay, now those are 5 of the powerful tools that I wanted to share with you. But what I also want to share are 3 what I call emergency tools. So these are a little bit more extreme tools, but they can still be really useful, especially in the short term, over the next few weeks perhaps, to try to give you a sense of, oh, I have options. I don't have to say things exactly this way. I can navigate my way around this better. And so that is the point of emergency tools, to give you a sense and a feeling of, I have alternate routes here. Okay? The first emergency tool I want to mention here is what
والله تمام عجيبة، والله عجيبة انت. والله انت عجيبة.
It's what I call the wow tool.
ايوه صح
It's one of my favorite tools to use. All this is when you find yourself, if you find yourself stuttering or blocking and it has already become obvious. So if it's the cashier and that person, they can already tell that, okay, you stuttered and you stuttered in a very obvious way. Once you reach that point, there's really no point in trying to ignore it or trying to pretend like it didn't happen. And so one of the great things you can do is to actually do something like this. So if you're at the gas station, you're at the cashier, and you say, hey, I want $30 gas on pump 6. And if you go, wow, okay, let me restart that. What I want is $30 gas on pump 6. Did you see what I did there? I employed this sort of emotional release of, I didn't just stay locked in this mode of stuttering and then trying to get through it. I used this wow-like expression to kind of diffuse the tension that's building perhaps in the room or between me and the cashier. So I can say, again, instead of being like, wow, okay, let me restart that. Having a rough day, you know. What I want, so I'm on pump 6, and could I please get $30? I'm telling you, it's gonna feel weird to acknowledge it at first, but when you've already stuttered and it's already obvious to the person or people you're speaking to, sometimes it's just better to acknowledge it and to release the tension and to own it a little bit and to just be like, wow. Now, I said it's wow. It's not, I'm so sorry that I stuttered. Please forgive me. It's none of that energy. It's just kind of confidence. It's like, yes, you didn't love that it happened, but also you're not going to be all apathetic and woe is me. You're like, wow, man, I'm just having a rough day. It's one of those days, you know? It just releases the energy. It's so cool. I love this tool so much, and it works really well to even just knowing that you have this as an option is really powerful, okay? So the second emergency tool is the soften the consonants tool. So this, if you feel like your voice blocks up on consonant sounds, especially like perhaps S's or K sounds, like soften the consonants, you know, that type of thing, then one of the things that I found helpful, especially